So this is my developmental insights project for lifespan development. And so within this project, what I'm going to do is talk briefly about two developmental issues and how to resolve them. And then at the end, I'm going to speak very broadly about human development in general. So the first developmental issue that I want to look at solving is intimacy versus isolation, which is part of Erickson's psychosocial theory. It is the developmental stage for young adulthood. And what's going on here is we're looking at solving whether someone is going to have intimacy in their life, which is forming strong romantic and platonic relationships, or be in a state of isolation in their life, which is failure to form these relationships. And so Erickson's not saying necessarily that someone's going to be one or the other. What he's saying is that we're looking to solve this issue. So the end goal is intimacy, but if the issue does not get solved, then the person will experience isolation. So failure to resolve this stage of Erickson's psychosocial development will, um, as all the stages, failure to resolve one of Erickson's stages will result in a lower sense of the self and cause issues with later stages. So these stages really build upon each other. And if one is not resolved correctly, then that means that later in life, the later psychosocial developmental stages might also not get fully resolved. Failure to resolve one of the stages can impact life beyond the stage. So, in particular, failure to resolve intimacy versus isolation can cause for unhealthy attachment styles to form. And one of these unhealthy attachment styles that can form from not solving intimacy versus isolation is someone could have an anxious attachment style. So this means that instead of having a healthy, confident attachment to somebody, they're very anxious. They might not necessarily fully believe that the person likes them, or they might just be have a lot of anxiety that is produced from that relationship. Constantly texting the person, for example, hey, are you mad at me? Like, what's going on? And with all of Erickson's psychosocial developmental stages, if this stage is not resolved in middle or early to middle adulthood, then the stage may be resolved later in life. So resolving the stage later in life revolves on first resolving the issues associated with not resolving the stage. So you kind of have to treat the symptoms before you necessarily treat the diagnosis here. So, for example, because this was not resolved, someone might develop an anxious attachment style in the form of codependency. To successfully resolve this stage, first, the codependency must be resolved. So, to resolve this stage later in life, I have outlined kind of a five five method way to resolve this stage later in life. The first one is support groups, but even before support groups, this individual therapy one should be up here first because individual therapy would be so vital, so important for the person to be able to explore the reasoning behind why this issue wasn't resolved and how they can individually work to resolve this issue. Once the individual has progressed through individual therapy and is at a safe place in their healing, then they should start going to support groups. Like I said, we're looking first to treat the symptoms before treating the diagnosis. And so by doing so, support groups for things such as codependency can be very vitally important. So going to these support groups, learning why you're like the way you are and how to overcome it with other people. So you kind of form that intimacy within the support group before you go out and you form it in real life. Um, Journaling is also very important for pretty much resolving all of the psychosocial stages later in life. You have to really be introspective and get to the heart of the issues and the challenges. And one of the things that can help with this introspection is journaling because you're putting it on paper. And then you can take these journals to your individual therapy sessions and also your support group therapy sessions and talk about the experiences that you experience in everyday life. Workbooks can also be very, very important and helpful in resolving these stages later in life. The workbooks can be anything from, codependency workbooks to kind of developing intimacy workbooks. And then social skills lessons. A lot of people who fall into the isolation, they lack those social skills. They lack what regular people would call, im important social skills. So being able to form those intimate relationships, even being able to start forming one is very important. So having those social skills lessons where you learn how to do it and you can have a professional, a therapist modeling to you, and then you can role play with that therapist. Hey, look, this is how it needs to go, and so on, so forth. Just a practice session, pretty much, with those social skills lessons. So the um next of Erickson's psychosocial stages that I want to look at solving later in life is well, not necessarily later in life, but helping someone to solve because, development is not a, as I will talk about later, it's not a solo endeavor. You really need a support system and a social network to help solve these stages. So when someone is in this stage in their life of um ger generativity versus stagnation, which occurs in middle adulthood, you really need someone to help you sometimes. This doesn't come automatic for all people. And what this stage is, it occurs in early adulthood. Generativity is continuing to contribute meaningful to the society and your family, and stagnation is just becoming stuck. And you do not, it says does contribute, does continue to meaningfully contribute, it should say does not continue to meaningfully contribute because you truly just don't. You become stuck. And yeah, you could be in a career still, but you can become stagnant within that career to where you're only kind of contributing the same thing over and over again. You want to really work on kind of becoming this, generating new ideas and new ways to contribute. So, failure to resolve this stage can result in a person feeling stuck in what they're currently doing and will cause productivity to decrease, leading to an increase in mental health issues. When we talk about productivity here, we're not necessarily talking about, the capitalist ideas of productivity. We're talking about productivity in its root sense, being productive with your life, living a meaningful life. Like Frankl describes in his work, Man's Search for Meaning, we are looking for meaning. We're trying to make meaning in everything. So, by living a meaningful life, you are being productive. And so, yes, you could have a career. This is very important to emphasize here. Yes, you could have a career that you're currently in, but you can be stagnant in that career, meaning that you no longer find meaning, you no longer find joy in it. So you want to find a way to produce that meaning and that joy in your career. So to resolve this stage, to help someone to resolve this stage, because as I said earlier, this isn't a this isn't development's not a solo endeavor. Development takes these social networks. It's so important to have these social networks that help you develop. So if you're looking to help someone resolve this stage, One thing you can do is help people find ways to advance, or, sorry, another typo, or to change their careers. You know, I just read an interesting article that talked about how people of my generation, that is people born in the 2000s, I was born in 2000 exactly, are more likely to have more than one career. And this is so important because we can get stuck doing the same thing repetitively over and over and over and over again. So it's so important to be able to advance in careers, to change it up, or to change careers entirely. You don't have to have just one career. You can become stagnant in your career. Say you've topped out and you're ready for change. You can get a new career. Another way is if someone doesn't really want to advance in their career or find a new career, find places to volunteer so that they can work on resolving the stage successfully. Volunteering, I mean, what's volunteering? It's working without being paid. You're doing something new, you're having new experiences. And by having these new experiences, you're truly able to to work to resolve this stage. Work with people to find things that they enjoy versus things that just keep them productive. This is so important because so many times we're like, well, you need to find something to stay productive. You need to find something to stay productive, but the person might not enjoy that. And that in itself can cause stagnation. If you don't enjoy something, you're just going through the motions. You're stagnant in it. You don't want to just be doing that. You want to be working to continuously find stuff that you enjoy, things that you find meaning in, so you can truly be productive. And this little last bullet point here, things as small as finding a new hobby can help people stay productive. It doesn't have to be some huge venture in volunteering or a whole shake up with a career change. It can be as simple as finding a new hobby and developing that new hobby to be productive and to find that meaning that we need in life. So, some overall insights. Development is not a solo endeavor. As I've talked about very many times throughout this presentation, we need our social systems to help us develop. That is so vitally important. We do not develop in isolation. We develop with social systems. And as we can see from um, intimacy versus isolation, when we do get isolated, we don't develop to our fullest potential. So having those social systems, relying on those social systems to really help us out and to help us get these changes are so important. And if you don't have those social systems naturally, like say you don't have a very vibrant family life or a very vibrant social life, work on ways to create it. You can go to there's things, there's like poetry readings. For example, where I'm from, where I am in Carrollton, we have poetry night at a local bar. We have things like trivia nights, things that you can develop that social network. Even if it's through a support group, you're still developing that social network and helping people develop, and people are helping you develop. Another thing to keep in mind is that development is not always linear. We get in this mindset that development is something that happens in certain stages, and it has to happen in certain stages. Yes, if one of Erickson's stages, for example, is not successfully resolved, it can cause issues later in life. But you can always go back and resolve it. As I showed earlier in the presentation with intimacy versus isolation, you can go back and solve it. It is not a linear development necessarily. You can kind of jump back and forth almost. And this last piece of insight is so vitally important. If there is something about yourself that you do not like, then you can change it. It's just as simple as that. Whether it's kind of simple thing such as I want to lose some weight, something common, I want to lose some weight, exercise more, or something more deep rooted, such as I'm codependent. I want to change that. I'm tired of being codependent. I'm tired of having anxious attachment style. Then you can change it. We're not stuck. Like I said, development is not necessarily linear. We're not stuck in our ways. We are ever developing, and we can change aspects about ourselves if we want to. So these three insights are just so vitally important, and they all feed off of each other too. I hope that you learned some stuff about development from this presentation. I enjoy doing it. And yeah, I think this is on YouTube. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave a comment. Bye bye.